She didn't look like someone who could end a career. That was the problem. Josephine Tate was wearing a gray cardigan the color of old dishwater and a pair of flat shoes she'd bought at a Target in Flagstaff 3 years ago. Her hair was pulled back without ceremony. She carried a canvas tote bag, the kind grocery stores hand out for free when you spend over $50, and inside it was a binder held shut with 2 rubber bands, a half-eaten granola bar, and a phone with a cracked screen she kept meaning to replace. She walked into the lobby of Meridian General Hospital at 8:14 on a Tuesday morning and asked the woman at the front desk where the administrative wing was. That was when it started. The woman at the front desk was named Tiffany Birch, 23 years old, 18 months into her first real job, and she had spent those 18 months learning, without anyone having to say so directly, exactly which people in that lobby deserved her full attention and which ones could wait. She looked at Josephine Tate's gray cardigan. She looked at the canvas bag. She looked at the flat shoes. She looked back at her computer screen. "Administrative wing is for staff and authorized personnel only," Tiffany said. "You'll need to check in at patient services. That's down the hall, second left." "I'm not a patient," Josephine said. "I have a 9 o'clock with the board." Tiffany typed something, or pretended to. "Do you have an appointment confirmation?" "I do. Can I see it?" Josephine reached into the canvas bag and produced the binder. She unclipped a sheet from the inside cover and slid it across the desk. Tiffany glanced at it, the way people glance at things they've already decided don't matter. "This just shows a meeting time," Tiffany said. "It doesn't show authorization for the administrative wing. I'm going to need to call upstairs before I can let you through." "That's fine," Josephine said. Tiffany did not call upstairs. She turned to her computer and resumed whatever she had been doing. Josephine stood at the desk and waited. A man in a suit walked through the lobby and nodded at Tiffany, and she buzzed him through without looking up from whatever she was typing. Another man, also in a suit, also buzzed through. Josephine watched this happen. After 6 minutes, she counted it was a habit. Josephine said, "I'm sorry, did you call up?" "I'm working on it," Tiffany said. She was not working on it. What happened next would be discussed for months in the break rooms and parking garages, and group texts of everyone who worked at Meridian General, and the version that got told would depend entirely on who was telling it. A security guard named Blaine Kowalski had been working the lobby entrance for 4 years. He was broad-shouldered and had the particular brand of authority that comes not from training or wisdom, but from having never once been seriously questioned. He had watched the exchange from his post near the door. He had made his assessment. He crossed the lobby and positioned himself beside Josephine. "Ma'am," he said, and the way he said it was not polite. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem," Josephine said. "I'm waiting for the front desk to call upstairs to confirm my appointment. Do you have ID?" "She has a confirmation sheet," Tiffany said, with the particular satisfaction of someone who has just received backup they didn't ask for but absolutely wanted. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see a photo ID and proof of your reason for being in this lobby." Blaine had a way of speaking that made everything sound like a command that had already been decided. "If you can't produce those, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside. I have a meeting with the board of directors at 9 o'clock, Josephine said. Her voice had not changed. It had the same even, unhurried quality it had when she'd asked about the administrative wing. "If you'd like to call up to confirm that, I'm happy to wait." "The board meeting," Blaine said, and smiled the kind of smile that wasn't one, "is for hospital executives and invited consultants, not walk-ins. I'm aware of that, so you're telling me you're an executive." There was a pause. "I'm telling you I have a 9 o'clock with the board," Josephine said. What she did not say, what she had not said, would not say, had never in her professional life found it necessary to say in a lobby, was anything more than that. Some people announce themselves. Josephine Tate had spent 22 years in rooms where the people who announced themselves the loudest were consistently the least important, and she had drawn her conclusions. Blaine Kowalski had not spent 22 years anywhere that had taught him the same lesson. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me." He took a step toward her, and the step itself was the message. Not a request, a direction. "We're going to step outside and sort this out. I'd prefer to sort it out here." "Ma'am, I'd prefer," Josephine said again, with the same quiet, "to sort it out here." A small cluster of people in the lobby had begun to notice. A nurse waiting for the elevator, a man in a visitor badge, two orderlies with a cart who had slowed without fully stopping. Tiffany at the desk, no longer pretending to type. Blaine reached out and took Josephine's arm above the elbow. It was not a violent grab. It was something worse than violent in certain ways. It was casual, the kind of contact that assumes it will not be resisted, that has never had to consider whether it should be made at all. He steered her toward the lobby entrance with the unhurried confidence of someone performing a routine task. Josephine did not resist. She walked, but what Blaine Kowalski did not know, what Tiffany Birch did not know, what none of the three people who took out their phones and filmed the next 45 seconds knew, was that Josephine Tate had, in the past 22 years, chaired the ethics review boards of two major hospital systems, testified before a Senate subcommittee on healthcare policy, been named twice to the national list of the 100 most influential people in American medicine, and that 3 weeks ago, by unanimous vote of Meridian General Hospital's board of directors, she had been appointed the institution's new chief executive officer. Her first official day was today. Outside, the morning air was cool. Josephine stood on the front steps of the hospital that was now, technically, hers to run, and she did what she had been doing since Blaine Kowalski's hand closed around her arm. She remembered everything. Badge number 1142. She'd seen it when he turned. The desk clerk's name tag. Tiffany B. The time on the lobby clock when he'd first approached. 8:21. The angle of the security camera above the front entrance. The make and model of the vehicle idling at the curb. The faces of the people who had filmed with their phones and the ones who had looked away. Memory, for Josephine, was not a gift. It was a decision she had made a long time ago, in a different lobby, in a different city, when she was 26, and no one had called it anything except what it was, and she had stood outside afterward and understood that if she was going to survive in rooms that did not yet believe she belonged in them, she would need to see everything and forget nothing. She stood on the steps for exactly 4 minutes. Then she went back inside. Tiffany Birch looked up from the desk, and the expression on her face moved through 3 distinct phases in about a second and a half. "I'd like to try again," Josephine said pleasantly. "Could you let the board know that Dr. Tate is in the lobby?" Something in Tiffany's face shifted. "Not much. Enough. Yes, of course. One moment." She picked up the phone. The moment that followed was 40 seconds long, and every one of those 40 seconds was its own small education. Tiffany spoke, listened. Her pen stopped moving. She set the pen down. She looked up at Josephine with an expression that was, in equal parts, horrified recognition and the desperate calculus of someone trying to determine whether there is any version of the next 5 minutes that does not end badly for them. There is not, Josephine could have told her, but she didn't. The elevator across the lobby opened, and 2 men in suits stepped out, moving quickly. The first was Raymond Ashworth, chairman of the board, 61 years old, silver-haired, the kind of man who had been powerful for so long that urgency had become beneath him. And yet here he was, moving fast, his hand already extended before he'd reached the center of the lobby. "Dr. Tate," he said, "I am so sorry. We were expecting you upstairs. I can't imagine. Please come up." The second man was the hospital's outgoing CEO, a man named Gerald Foss, who had 3 weeks ago sat in a boardroom and voted in favor of Josephine's appointment, and then sent her a personally signed congratulatory note on cream-colored stationery. He stood now slightly behind Ashworth and wore the expression of someone who has just watched a very expensive vase fall from a shelf in what feels like slow motion. Josephine shook Ashworth's hand. "Thank you, Raymond," she said. "I appreciate that." She did not look at Tiffany. She did not look at the space near the front entrance, where Blaine Kowalski had resumed his post, and was now standing with the rigid stillness of a man who has understood, in the last 45 seconds, that he has made an error whose dimensions he cannot yet fully calculate. She walked to the elevator. Ashworth held the door. Inside he exhaled. "Dr. Tate, I want to personally assure you." "Raymond," she said, and her voice was the same voice it had been at the front desk, in the lobby, on the steps. "I'd like to discuss the morning's events as part of our agenda today. If we can add 15 minutes, I think it would be worth the time." He said yes. Of course he said yes. The meeting was on the 41st floor, in a room with a view of the city that Josephine would have found more impressive if she hadn't spent the last 20 years in rooms with comparable views. 14 board members. A table that had been polished recently enough to still smell of it. Coffee in real cups, not paper ones. She sat at the head of the table. That was where the chair was placed. That was where she sat. The first agenda item was her introduction. The second was a financial overview. The third, added that morning in the 45 seconds between the lobby and the elevator, was titled, on the printed agenda that an assistant had quickly updated and placed at each seat, Security Protocols and Institutional Culture. She didn't raise her voice. She never did. She described what had happened in the lobby the way she would describe any clinical event, with precision, with sequence, with an attention to the specific details that made it real rather than general. Badge number 11142. Name tag Tiffany B. The hand on her arm. The steps outside. The 4 minutes. 14 people listened and not one of them spoke. I want to be clear, Josephine said, that I'm not raising this to be punitive. I'm raising it because it tells me something true about this institution, and I think we should know true things about this institution before we decide what kind of institution we want it to be. The room was quiet. The question I'd like us to sit with, she continued, is not whether that employee made a mistake. Of course he made a mistake. The question is what kind of environment produces that mistake as a natural outcome. Because environments like that don't correct themselves. Someone has to decide to correct them. She let that land. Then she picked up the first page of the financial overview and said, "Shall we move on?" What happened after the meeting is the part that travels, the way certain things always travel. First, through the building, then through the industry, then into the particular ecosystem of conversations and texts and shares that determine what the world decides to pay attention to. Blaine Kowalski was placed on administrative leave that afternoon pending a review of the incident, which 3 people had filmed and which was, by 5 o'clock, being discussed in a way that made administrative leave feel like the beginning of a longer conversation about his continued employment. The review board convened the following week. Josephine did not advocate for his termination and did not advocate against it. She sat on no disciplinary committees. She had said what she had to say in the room with the polished table, and she left the institutional machinery to do what institutional machinery does when someone at the top of it has decided that something must actually change. Tiffany Birch was not terminated. She was moved to a different role, one with less public-facing responsibility, while she completed a training program that Josephine's office commissioned from an outside consultant, not as punishment but, as the memo circulated to department heads read, as part of a broader institutional commitment to ensuring that every person who walks through our doors is treated with dignity regardless of how they present. Tiffany cried in the bathroom twice during her first week of training, and then, by the 3rd week, began to actually understand something she had not understood before, which is that the way she had learned to sort people in that lobby had not been her idea. It had been taught to her by the culture of a place, without anyone ever having to say it aloud. That understanding did not make her feel better, but it made her feel something, which is different. The video, or rather, the videos, because 3 separate people had filmed from 3 separate angles, appeared online by noon on Tuesday and by Wednesday morning had been viewed enough times to generate the specific kind of media attention that large institutions cannot ignore and rarely survive intact. The footage showed what it showed. A woman in a gray cardigan, standing quietly being taken by the arm, walked to the door. It showed her face, which was still impatient in a way that, once you knew what she knew about who she was in that building, became something that people found difficult to look at directly. The captions people wrote varied. The one that got shared most simply said, "She was the CEO. It was her first day." Josephine did not comment publicly on the footage. Her office released a 2-sentence statement acknowledging the incident and confirming the institution's commitment to a review of security protocol. She did not give interviews. She did not, as several people who were not her advised her to do, take the opportunity to make a statement about her experience as a Black woman navigating institutional spaces. She did not, as others advised, take a deliberately forgiving tone for the sake of the hospital's public image. She simply went to work. She was in her office by 7:30 every morning. She walked the floors, the wards, the break rooms, the service corridors, where the people who kept the hospital running moved through their days without anyone from the 41st floor usually seeing them. She learned names. She remembered them. She asked questions and listened to the answers in the particular way that made people, over time, believe they had been actually heard, which was because they had been. She met with Ashworth 3 weeks after her first day and presented a revised set of security protocols, a proposal for a quarterly institutional culture review, and a budget line for ongoing staff training that did not, she noted, need to come from anywhere new in the budget, but could be reallocated from a line item that had been sitting largely unused for 4 years. Ashworth read through the documents. He was a man who had been powerful for long enough to know when someone in the room was more capable than him, and he had the particular grace, which not all powerful men develop, of finding that fact more useful than threatening. "This is thorough," he said. "It's a start," Josephine said. There was a moment where the city was visible through the window behind his chair, and Josephine thought about the steps outside the lobby, the cool morning air, the 4 minutes she had stood there counting. She thought about the woman she had been at 26, in a different lobby, in a different city, understanding for the first time what kind of country she was living in and deciding, with a deliberateness that would define the next 2 decades of her life, how she was going to move through it. Not louder, not smaller, exactly as she was. She thought about all the people who had passed through the lobby of Meridian General in the years before she arrived, the ones who had been sorted quickly into the categories of belonging or not belonging, the ones who had stood at that desk and been made to feel like they were in the wrong place, in the wrong clothes, with the wrong bag, the wrong shoes, the wrong face. She thought about what it would mean for this hospital to become a different kind of place. Not perfectly different. She had no interest in perfect, which was a distraction from functional, but meaningfully different, in the ways that could actually be measured. In wait times and complaint rates and the staff survey results that no one on the 41st floor had apparently read in 2 years. "I'd like to walk the emergency department this afternoon," she said to Ashworth. "If you'd like to join me." He said yes. Of course he said yes. She stood. She picked up the canvas tote bag from the chair beside her. The same one, the grocery store one, the one she kept meaning to replace and kept not replacing because it held what she needed it to hold, and that was sufficient. And she walked toward the door. She had 43 names to remember from the morning's rounds. She had already begun. If you've made it this far, I want you to sit with something for a second. Not the headlines, not the footage, not the part where the powerful man shakes her hand in the lobby, but the part before all of that, the 4 minutes on the steps. Because that's the part nobody talks about. Every person who has ever been made to feel like they don't belong in a room they have every right to be in knows those 4 minutes. The counting, the decision to go back in anyway. Josephine didn't need anyone to validate what happened to her. She walked back through those doors because that hospital was hers to run, and she was going to run it. But here's what I want to ask you. How many people don't walk back in? How many people stand on those steps, in their gray cardigans and their sensible shoes, and decide it's not worth it? And what does that cost all of us, not just them, when they do? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I mean that. I read them. And if this story made you feel something, share it, because the people who need to hear it aren't always the ones who go looking for it. Hit the like button if you believe the way you treat someone, the moment they walk through your door, says everything about who you are. And subscribe to Velvet Reckoning, because we're not done talking about the rooms that haven't decided yet what kind of rooms they want to be.